When Ethan signed the papers that would sell the entire company, he didn't feel victory. He felt silence. Across the table, Laura stared at him, still unaware that the sound of that pen dragging across paper was the sound of their ending. Within hours, the empire they had built together would be gone, and she would learn the true cost of a betrayal that began in secret but ended in daylight. The headlines called it a strategic move, colleagues called it an unexpected decision. But no one knew that behind the polite language stood a man who had turned heartbreak into justice. Ethan didn't scream, didn't make a scene. He simply acted with precision. He sold everything, wiped his name clean, and left the woman who deceived him with nothing but regret. But stories like this don't begin with contracts and signatures. They start with something smaller, a scent, a detail, a feeling. So to understand how everything unraveled, we have to go back. Back to that night when Ethan caught a faint, unfamiliar perfume in the air and realized that something in his life had quietly, irreversibly changed. The office was almost empty when Ethan found her perfume lingering in the air, faint, floral, and foreign to the hour. It didn't belong to late nights or spreadsheets. It belonged to secrets. He sat in the leather chair he had chosen years ago, the one they had joked was their throne. Back then, they shared everything. Ideas, dreams, even silence. Now, silence felt like a stranger sitting across from him. On the desk lay her keycard. The small silver rectangle caught the light, flashing once before settling into shadow. It shouldn't have been there. She never left without it. He turned it over between his fingers, remembering the day he'd given it to her. Her smile, her promise. No walls between us ever. He had believed her. That was his first mistake. Ethan wasn't the kind of man who went through phones or tracked messages. He believed in privacy, in trust, in the invisible fabric that holds two people together when the world tries to pull them apart. But that fabric had been tearing slowly, thread by thread. The late meetings, the half-answers, the way she began using I instead of we. He thought he was just tired. That they both were. But fatigue doesn't make someone lie. Love doesn't make someone hide. The rain started against the window, slow at first, then steady. Chicago at night was beautiful from that height, the skyline glowing like a circuit board, millions of lights pretending to be stars. But he saw no beauty in it tonight, only distance. He opened his laptop. One email caught his eye. A forwarded message she must have sent by mistake. The subject line was short. Transfer confirmed. It wasn't the kind of message you expect from your wife or your business partner. He clicked it. The numbers didn't lie. Hundreds of thousands siphoned quietly over months. Fake consulting fees, new accounts, a name he didn't recognize. Daniel H. His hand didn't shake. His heart didn't race. There was only stillness, the kind that comes right before something breaks. He looked again at the keycard in his hand. For 15 years, that little piece of metal had opened every door in his world. His company, his marriage, his trust. Now it felt like a confession. He placed it on the desk, perfectly aligned with the edge, and whispered to the empty room. No walls between us, right? The sound of rain swallowed his words. In that moment, Ethan didn't know what he would do next. He only knew one thing. Love was no longer part of the equation. And what remained was colder, quieter, and far more deliberate. Some betrayals burn fast. Others he thought deserved to freeze first. The following morning, the office felt heavier. Not with people, but with ghosts. Ethan moved through the halls like a man walking through the remains of his own creation. Every photo on the wall, the award ceremonies, the magazine covers, the corporate smiles, looked staged now. Lies framed in glass. He paused before one of them. Him and Laura at the ribbon-cutting ceremony, the day they opened the new headquarters. She had worn a white suit, her hand resting proudly on his chest. In the photo, she looked in love. But now he realized she wasn't looking at him. She was looking at the camera, at the image she was building. He could almost hear her voice again. We built this together. But the numbers from last night still echoed louder. 237,000, 418,000, 630,000. Each figure like a quiet betrayal. Perfectly calculated. He called their accountant. Calm, precise, professional. I just need the last 6 months' transfers, he said. No tremor in his tone. No hint of suspicion. Ethan had learned long ago that real power doesn't come from shouting. It comes from knowing. By noon, the documents arrived. PDF files, spreadsheets, bank statements. Cold, mechanical truth. He opened one, then another, tracing the pattern. Each transaction led to the same holding company, one registered under a false address in Miami. The signature on the authorization line was hers. He leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling. The fluorescent light hummed softly, the only sound in the room. That hum reminded him of the night she had first lied. It was late, 11:47 p.m. She had said she was working late with a client. He remembered texting her, "Want me to pick you up?" Her reply came instantly. "No, don't worry, just finishing something." Back then, he'd believed her, because that's what love does. It blinds you in the name of trust. He closed the laptop. The betrayal wasn't just financial. It was emotional embezzlement, stealing belief, piece by piece. That evening when Laura came home, she kissed him on the cheek. Her lipstick smelled of wine. "You're working too hard again," she teased. Her tone was soft, familiar, too familiar. He watched her hang her coat, watched the way she avoided his eyes. "Where were you?" he asked casually. "Dinner with a client," she replied, not missing a beat. He nodded. "The same client from Miami?" For the briefest second, something flickered in her expression. Surprise, fear, or maybe guilt. But she hid it well, recovering with a practiced smile. "What are you talking about?" Ethan smiled back. "Just business," he said. He let the silence stretch, long enough for her to grow uneasy. Then he turned away, pretending to read an email. She exhaled, quietly relieved. But inside, something in him had shifted. He was no longer searching for proof. He had it. Now he was calculating. That night, while she slept beside him, Ethan stared at the ceiling again. The same blank space he'd once watched while dreaming of their future. Now it looked like a void. His company had been built on precision. Every design, every deal, every risk, all measured, deliberate. That's how he would handle this. No confrontation, no screaming, no broken plates. Only balance, restored in silence. The keycard still lay in his drawer. He took it out, turned it in his hand once more, and whispered to himself, if she wanted to leave with half, she should have built half. In that instant, Ethan knew exactly what he had to do. The betrayal was already complete. Now it was time to return the favor. Not with rage, but with reason. 2 weeks later, the boardroom was full. The air smelled faintly of cologne, printer ink, and endings. Ethan stood at the head of the long oak table, sleeves rolled, watch glinting under the sterile lights. Every face around him waited for his signal. Lawyers, partners, advisors. People who had seen him build an empire and were now watching him dismantle it piece by piece. Laura sat across from him. Perfect posture, red blazer, polished smile. The image of composure. Only her hands betrayed her, fingers tightening around a pen until her knuckles turned pale. He didn't look at her when he spoke. "As of today," he began, voice steady, "Cole and Merritt Designs will be acquired by Ardent Group. All assets, shares, and intellectual property will transfer by midnight." The room buzzed with whispers. Laura's eyes widened. "What?" she said, laughing lightly, trying to control the tremor in her voice. "You're joking, right?" Ethan finally met her gaze. "No, I'm done." She leaned forward. "You can't sell without my approval. I own 49%. He slid a folder toward her. "Not anymore." Inside were the transfer documents, signed, sealed, and notarized. Her name was crossed out, replaced by a trust registered in his name only. She flipped through the pages, disbelief hardening into panic. "You can't do this." "I already did." The room fell silent. Only the rain tapping against the glass broke the stillness. The same rain that had fallen the night he discovered her secret. She stood abruptly, voice cracking. "You're destroying everything we built." He leaned back, calm as stone. "No, Laura. You destroyed it the moment you started building something else with him." Her face drained of color. "Who told you?" Ethan smiled faintly. "You did. Just not with words." She sank back into her chair, eyes glistening, mascara trembling. For a moment, the confident woman who'd once shared his dreams looked small, almost fragile. But he felt nothing. No triumph, no sorrow. Just a quiet recognition that love had finally expired. "Why didn't you confront me?" she whispered. "Why this?" He folded his hands. "Because I wanted you to see what honesty feels like when it's gone." Her breath hitched. "You'll regret this." "Maybe," he said. "But at least I'll regret it alone." He rose, gathered his briefcase, and paused by the window. Below, the city pulsed with life. Taxis, sirens, neon reflections on wet asphalt. All moving forward, all indifferent. He turned one last time toward her. "You said there would be no walls between us," he murmured. "You were right. There aren't any now. Just space." Then he walked out, leaving her surrounded by the hollow empire they had built together. A monument to ambition, deceit, and silence. The sound of the door closing echoed like a verdict. News of the sale hit the industry within days. Articles called it a bold strategic move, a surprising exit, a calculated transition. None of them knew it was a burial. Ethan read the headlines once, then closed the tabs. The world could speculate. He already knew the only truth that mattered. Laura, however, didn't have the luxury of detachment. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Partners, old clients, former colleagues, everyone wanted answers. Some called out of curiosity, others out of fear. Is it true? What happens to the contracts? Why weren't we informed? The questions piled up like accusations. She tried to maintain the same polished tone she'd used in the boardroom, but the script was gone. For the first time in years, she had nothing to offer but fragments. It was a strategic decision. Ethan handled the negotiations. I wasn't fully aware. The more she spoke, the more obvious it became. She wasn't in control. Then the real blow arrived. A neatly worded email from the legal team representing Ardent Group. The subject line was clinical. Termination and settlement notice. Her eyes scanned the text, each line pulling the ground out from under her. Her employment contract, terminated. Her executive privileges, revoked. Her equity, already transferred before the sale. By the time she reached the end, her hands were shaking. The words blurred, but one sentence burned through the haze. No further compensation is due. She called Ethan. He let it ring longer than necessary before answering. "What did you do?" she demanded, voice splitting between fury and fear. "I signed what you started," he replied. "You stole everything from me," she snapped. There was a pause, a quiet inhale on the other end. "You can't steal what was never truly yours," he said softly. "You gambled with us, Laura. I just decided not to keep paying your debt." She tried to threaten him with lawyers. He reminded her of the prenup she'd signed years ago, the one she barely read, confident she would never need it. It clearly separated his premarital assets, the original company shares, and protected any trust he might set up. She had married a man who planned for storms, even while believing in sunshine. When she realized she had no real leverage left, she reached for the last thing she thought she still had: pity. "Ethan," she whispered, voice softening. "We were us. Doesn't that mean anything?" He stared at the key card on his desk, the same one she had abandoned without thinking. "It did," he answered. "Until I realized I was the only one still living in that story." The fallout spread quietly. The man she'd been seeing, Daniel, stopped answering her messages. No more late-night calls, no more promises of a new start once she had her money secured. The last text he sent was short. "This got too messy. I'm out." That was the reversal she hadn't seen coming. She thought she was trading security for passion, comfort for excitement. Instead, she learned something cruel and simple. Ethan may have moved slowly, but he was the only one who had truly loved her. The penthouse went first, then the car, then the trips. Piece by piece, the life she had curated for the world crumbled, leaving behind something raw and unfamiliar. Herself, without an audience. One evening, she passed by the old office building. Through the glass, she saw new logos, new faces, new furniture. Her reflection hovered like a ghost on the surface of the glass. She reached into her purse out of habit, fingers searching for a card that was no longer there. The keycard lived now in a drawer in Ethan's smaller, quieter home office. He didn't look at it often, but on nights when the house felt too silent, he would open the drawer, see that piece of metal, and remember. Some justice doesn't arrive in courtrooms or arguments. It arrives in the form of doors that no longer open for the ones who took them for granted. 6 months passed before Ethan saw her again. It was at a cafe near the river, a place they used to go when everything still felt possible. He hadn't planned it. She was simply there, sitting by the window, stirring a cup that had already gone cold. The city moved behind her like a film playing too fast. She looked smaller somehow, not thinner, just quieter. like someone who had finally run out of words. She noticed him before he could leave. Their eyes met through the reflection of the glass. For a moment, neither of them moved. Then she gestured for him to join her. He hesitated, then walked inside. "Hi," she said softly. "Hi." The silence that followed wasn't hostile, just human. Two people sitting inside the ruins of something that once mattered. "I heard you moved out of the city," she said. He nodded. "Closer to the lake." "I needed quiet," she smiled faintly. "You always liked the quiet." He didn't answer. She looked down at her hands. No ring, no manicure, no expensive watch. Her nails were short, clean, honest. "I wanted to say I'm sorry," she said finally. "Not because of what I lost, but because of what I broke." Ethan studied her face, the sincerity in her eyes, the exhaustion beneath it. For the first time, he didn't feel anger, only distance, the kind that can't be crossed anymore. "I know," he said. Tears welled in her eyes. "You didn't have to destroy everything." He leaned back, calm, steady. "I didn't destroy it. I just stopped pretending it was still alive." She nodded, wiping a tear that escaped despite her effort to hold it in. "You always were better at endings." He looked out the window. The river glimmered under the late afternoon light, slow and indifferent. "No," he murmured. "I just learned that closure doesn't come from someone saying sorry. It comes from stopping the replay." They sat there for another minute, both knowing this was their final conversation. When he stood to leave, she reached into her bag and pulled something out. His old company keycard. She must have kept it all that time. "I found this in a box," she said, placing it on the table. "I thought maybe you'd want it." He stared at the small piece of metal. The same one that had started it all. "Keep it," he said gently. "A reminder." She tilted her head. "Of what?" "That doors only stay open when both people want to walk through them." He turned and left without looking back. Outside, the wind carried the scent of rain again. The same scent from that night months ago. But it felt different now. Clean. Ethan walked along the river until the cafe disappeared from view. For the first time in a long while, he felt something close to peace. Not triumph, not bitterness. Just stillness. He realized that revenge hadn't freed him. Letting go had. When he got home, he opened the drawer where the other keycard had once been. The space was empty now. He closed it, turned off the light, and sat by the window. The city glowed in the distance, the same skyline that had witnessed his rise and fall. But tonight, it didn't feel like a battlefield anymore. It felt like closure. He whispered to the quiet room. Not to her, not to anyone in particular, but to whatever still listened. Some endings aren't punishments. They're peace disguised as loss. And with that, Ethan finally exhaled. Not the breath of a man who'd won, but of one who had survived. Moral truth: justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply walks away and never looks back.